Welcome back nerds, Fino here. I was kinda hoping Oberon would wait another week to come out, but this guy certainly loves throwing curveballs, doesn't he? Oberon is a 5-star pretender, the first of a new class that acts as a reverse alter ego. They have 1.5 times damage against the knight classes, Saber, Archer, and Lancer, while suffering comparable penalties against riders, casters, and assassins. They have true class advantage against alter egos and true class disadvantage against foreigners, completing the class triangle between the three. Pretenders also have standard interactions with berserkers. After Abigail, you might be worried about them sandbagging the first member of a new class, but rest assured it's just her. Oberon's pretty slick, so let's take a look under the hood. First off, we have Evening Shroud. It's a party NP damage buff with a fixed 20% charge. The charge value doesn't scale, but you'll want to level this up anyway. It's like a third priority among his skills, but they're all pretty damn important, as you're gonna find out. Next up is Morning Lark. It's a targeted 50% battery and star dump. However, it applies an effect that saps 20% charge from that same servant at the end of said turn. This clock is treated as a buff, so you can't cleanse it off normally. Between Evening Shroud and Morning Lark, Oberon has a combined 70% battery for a single servant, 20 of which splashes across your entire frontline. This is the highest value of the major supports, and it allows you to make some unconventional attackers work. Well, work in the relative sense, but we'll get back to that. Rounding out Oberon's regular skills is Ending of Dreams. It's a targeted buff granting a single turn of a buster buff, but far more important is the special NP modifier. At level 10, this doubles the effectiveness of all NP damage buffs. This is why it's so important to also max Evening Shroud. Even if your only NP damage source is Evening Shroud, that turns its 30% buff into a 60% buff. And get this, the multiplier works on Black Grail. A max limit broken Black Grail gives 80% NP damage. With Ending of Dreams, that becomes an earth-shattering 160%. If you want to min-max, you can even equip him with Everyone's Girl Da Vinci. If you can land that specific face card the same turn that your main attacker goes in, you just made a nice profit on its NP damage. But this kind of power comes with a catch. Ending of Dreams applies a boxed debuff to its target. You can't prevent it by any means. If you use it, you gotta deal with it. At the end of the turn, it purges all buffs on its beneficiary and puts them to sleep. Unlike Summer Abigail's terrible debuff, this effect is permanent and unremovable. Finally, it applies a 3-turn taunt. While this usually means they're dead meat, I've had a few cases in the past where they actually survived until the taunt wore off, and it's an absolute catastrophe, because you can't swap them out or even gong them away. What this means is that as soon as you pop this buff, your attacker is a dead man walking, so you should only use this to decisively end a fight, either on a boss's exposed health bar or the third wave of a farming node. Speaking of farming, Oberon actually has a noble Phantasm of the AoE buster variety. Rhyme Goodfellow purges offensive buffs and puts your enemies to sleep for a turn. Unfortunately, it's not as eternal sleep, but it still acts as a de facto stun if you need to play for time. Its overcharge effect is anti-lawful damage. Seems alright, but Rhyme Goodfellow comes with a very serious drawback. It makes your enemies invulnerable for a turn. Now it'll wear off by your next turn, but unless you have some sort of invuln pierce, your follow-up cards aren't going to do any damage on your NP turn. Not all downside, technically. This stops you from waking up your target, but in general it's a pain in the ass. If you're using this defensively or Oberon's just clearing trash mobs, you should put this last in your chain. And if you're using this offensively, it's essential that you one-shot whatever you're attacking. Using Oberon as an attacker isn't the weirdest thing in the world. He falls under the category of abnormal buster loopers. You can actually utilize Black Grail, though doing this requires 4 chargers, 2 Koenskayas, a 50% split charger, and himself. You start things off by getting his append skill to start the fight at 10%. With both of his buffs, that gets him to 80%. Because of this, you actually start the fight with your generic split charger on the field instead of the second Koenskaya. They donate 20%, you use your first Koen's relevant buffs, and pull the trigger. On turn 2, you use Koen's battery and then plug her out for the other Koenskaya. Use all of her skills and you have your NP back to clear the wave. On turn 3, your Oberon buffs are back up. Evening Shroud and Morning Lark have cooldowns of 6 turns or less. Because you use them on turn 1, you get 2 turns of natural cooldown reduction, which makes the numbers work. You use your split charger's 30% battery and all of Oberon's skills, including Ending of Dreams. This gives you a massive NP to finish the fight. So yeah, you can use Oberon as an attacker, though you'd have to roll a few copies of him, especially if you want to use him as a generalist anti-knight class farmer. In my experience, an NP1 Oberon feels like a potato. That said, NP1 is plenty if you just want to use him as a support. In my Koenskaya system video, I mentioned there's a lot of attackers that highly benefit from him being the third charger, or absolutely require him to 3-turn farm in the first place. And get this, you don't even need to use him with buster servants. They obviously get the most value out of his buster buff, but Ending of Dreams is great with pretty much any attacker. And art servants are the ones that can most reliably carry Black Grail, so don't underestimate his value even if they have the refund situation in hand. But if you do need him to meet charge requirements, be very careful about when you use his second skill. Losing 20% charge can be an absolute disaster for an arts attacker, especially if they're NP1, which stops them from accumulating over 100% charge. In general, think of a support Oberon as rocket fuel. He'll let a servant punch way above their weight class for a single turn, but at the cost of depleting them completely. Unless you need him on the field early for charge reasons, you're better off keeping him in reserve and only deploying him once you're in a position to end the fight decisively. For this reason, the Order Change Mystic Codes are his best friends. The Chaldea combat uniform is always available, but a little down the road in Tunguska Sanctuary, we get the Decisive Battle uniform. And that's serendipitous. This code has both a swap and NP damage buff. The latter caps out at 20%, making it a great complement to Ending of Dreams. Before I get too much into Oberon's endgame applications, let's take care of some loose ends. This guy has a number of passives, but two stand out in particular. The first of these is Midsummer Night's Dream. It makes him immune to mental debuffs and curses. The former includes Sleep, Confusion, Terror, and Charm. Also Summer Kiara's debuff if you ever have to fight her again. Oberon's other passive is very strange. It gives a small debuff success rate boost to your party. Doesn't apply against foreigners apparently. However, it has a drawback in that it specifically nerfs Merlin. If Oberon is on the field at the same time as a friendly Merlin, it will actually reduce the latter's buff success chance by 20%. And it gets weirder. As of this recording, the anti-Merlin effect only applies to caster Merlin, like Servant ID 150 Merlin. This matters because there are two Merlins in the game. Proto Merlin comes out next year and is completely unaffected, so fuck old Merlin in particular, I guess. I'm pretty sure Oberon's Bonds He is a spoiler, so I'm not going to show it, but it gives your frontline an anti-lawful buff. This is a legitimately useful effect in a supporting application, so having it as an option is going to give you some good value. For this reason, don't be afraid to stick him in your backline as an insurance policy while he farms bond levels. Now let's talk about the endgame. Starting from next year's summer event, 90++ free quests become a thing. These have extremely brutal enemy arrangements and health values, with some final wave enemies going above 1 million. While some highly specialized setups might be able to scrape together enough power to meet this damage check without Oberon, his charge/damage combo opens up a lot of possibilities in team building, so you do want to have him around. If he misses first banner, he thankfully has a second in the lead up to Lost Belt 7. This creates a 5-month window where you'd want Oberon without having him, but that's honestly not the end of the world. You could just slum it up in 90+ if you really had to. If you don't have Black Rail, just remember that NP damage is king. You'll get some freebies to help you on this front. Aerial Drive comes back this year, and Cranking will be featured in next year's Super Bunyan event. Both of these are outstanding picks for 3-charge Buster Loopers since they meet the starting charge requirement while providing relevant buffs. For raw damage, you can always contend with a poor man's Black Rail, Heaven's Feel. It'll be a substantial drop-off in damage, but you've got to work with what you got. I will note that the 7th anniversary pick ticket has Black Rail as an option, but 95% of you are going to want Kaleidoscope instead for general account building reasons. Alright, let's talk about the elephant in the room. Some attackers are so bad at their jobs that 2 coins and an Oberon can't enable them to 3-turn farm. Instead, they need 2 Oberons, leading to an abomination called the double Oberon system. I'll get more in depth in a separate video, but you should understand one very severe drawback about running 2 Oberons. Ending of Dreams doesn't play nice with itself. Yeah, the Buster buff stacks, but the MP amplifier doesn't. You don't quadruple your effects. You can't split its usage over 2 turns because your attacker is bricked as soon as you use either one. This means your turn 1 and 2 damage is going to be in the toilet compared to a standard double Koyan or Castoria setup, so understand that it's a possibility you may not want to explore unless you have no other option. Oberon is an elusive and highly valuable servant, and you very much want to grab a copy of him. If you blew your load on Morgan and Melusine, that might be difficult, but I recommend scraping together enough quartz to get both him and Koyanskaya ASAP. If you can't, then you'll need to triage, and I'll be working on a video to help you out with that. Oberon is good for decisively ending battles, but if he lingers on the field for too long, he'll throw your team into chaos. But this risk is well worth his strategic benefits. His massive battery opens up your team building options, and his NP amplifier lets you reach for new heights in terms of damage. Well worth the price of admission. Like if you found this video helpful, subscribe for more, and come watch me at twitch.tv/Finotaisen where I stream every weekend, 3 PM Pacific time, Friday through Sunday. This weekend, my main and mistake accounts will be rolling for Oberon himself, so you won't want to miss it. I'll see you there.